we live in a world where men control the tools of power, be it economic, political, social, cultural. And although women participate in all these different facets of life, men control the keys to the real power. Whenever I meet new people, the most frequent question I get, especially from young women, is, what did you do to get to where you are? Initially, I thought that they wanted to learn about my career in terms of where I studied, where I worked, or the people I met along the way. But the more young women that asked me this question, the more I probed. And the more I probed, the more I realized that the real question they were asking me is, how do you manage to balance it all? They ask me how I manage to balance it all because I am a wife, I'm an entrepreneur, I am a mother to 2 lovely children, an 8-year-old girl and a soon-to-be 3-year-old boy. I have lived, worked, and studied in various countries, including Kenya, the US, the UK, and I am the CEO of Enda, which is essentially the first and only company in Kenya and Africa to make running shoes. So hence, when they hear all this, they ask me, how do you manage to balance it all? The fact that so many young women are asking this question is tragic. And even more tragic is that we live in a world where they are surprised when I tell them my answer. And the truth is, I am where I am today because I am a free woman in an oppressive world. And the reason I am a free woman is because my father was instrumental in giving me the same equal opportunities that my brothers had. I played just as much as they did. I did a fairly equal amount of house chores as they did, and I had time to pursue my pleasures and passions just as much as everybody in the house did. And before you think that I came from a wealthy family, far from it. We were not wealthy. Early on, I remember we were living in a 1-bedroomed house. My parents, their 5 children, 2 nieces, and very frequent on and off visitors that came and went as they pleased without any notice. Can I have an amen from the Luyas in the house? The truth is, I am a consequence of my father's choices. And for context, one of my cousins was married off at the age of 12. And in a place where that was accepted, despite it being illegal, there is no guarantee that that could not have been me. Would I be standing here in front of you today if it was not for the men in my life? The answer is no, and there lies the problem. When I was about 12 years old, I remember taking a walk with my brother along River Nzoia, which borders our ancestral land, and we were talking about my cousin. Now, my cousin had married an amazing, beautiful woman, and she was smart. We adored this woman. But the problem was, every day after my cousin touched alcohol, he would beat the crap out of that woman. And I remember asking my brother, what is wrong with him? Does he not see her potential? Does he not see how brilliant she is? And my brother said one thing that remains true up to today. He told me, a woman is who she marries. Essentially, if you happen to be married by a visionary, you're set. However, if you happen to be married by someone who is insecure, does not appreciate your value or see you're intelligent, you're doomed. The reality is, as women, our future is directly linked to the kind of partner that we have in life. And the relationship between us and our partners is governed by culture and traditions. And when you look at culture and traditions, they are ruled by patriarchy. So in short, as women, our lives are ruled by patriarchy. Patriarchy is a threat because it directly contributes to Africa's underdevelopment. I mean, how can a continent ever develop if half of its population is unable to realize their potential? Women work hard. We do, in our homes, in our careers, in our relationships. Unfortunately, most of the work that women do is unpaid. And also, we have to fight harder to have the same equal chance that men have. And that equal chance is the freedom to be. The freedom to be. When I talk about the freedom to be, I mean the freedom to put up your feet at the end of a long day without feeling the obligations of domesticity. You know, you have come from a long day, a long day at work, you still have to worry about cooking, you have to worry about your children, and there's still someone expecting conjugal rights. It's never ending. And the thing is, that freedom to be is essentially enjoyed by men. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I'm not necessarily advocating for a 50-50 split of house chores that you do half and I do half. No. The freedom to be is essentially to have your partner's back just as much as they have your back. It essentially means that both of you in a relationship work together to build each other in different ways so that it's not a place where one person is suffering from servitude and another is enjoying personal service. It can't work like that. Growing up, I remember in the village that, because usually we used to go there and you'd find that the men would sit under a tree and they would talk and drink tea the whole day. Meanwhile, the women would be in the kitchen like laboring hard and slogging out one meal after the other. Time for breakfast, it's done. Before it's even time to think, it's time for lunch. Before you've even washed the dishes, you have to plan dinner. And you don't forget to wash the children in between. So essentially, it becomes a vicious cycle that takes away women from anything that they could ever be. And don't mistake me, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that for most women, that ritual is not a choice. It is a way of life. I myself, my parents gave me that opportunity to decide whether I wanted to be part of that or not. I didn't take part because I chose to, but most women don't have that choice. A common story in Greek mythology is that of the Trojan horse. For those unfamiliar with the Trojan horse, the Greeks had been trying to conquer the independent and well-guarded city of Troy for many, many, many years. And they were just about to give up until they came up with a brilliant plan. They decided to build a huge horse, and then they put the best of their soldiers in that horse, and then the Greek army pretended to sail away. The people of Troy thought that the Greek army had surrendered, and they celebrated, they say, we've won, and they pulled the horse into their city without knowing that the best of the Greek soldiers were in that horse. And true to form, when nighttime came, the soldiers came out of that horse, they opened the city gates, the army that had pretended to sail back came in, and that is how the mighty city of Troy was destroyed. Patriarchy is Africa's Trojan horse. It comes all pretty, wrapped up in a bow, giving men the option of choice. Should I do this? Should I do that? What we need to remember, however, is that the Trojan horse was also the same thing that led to the destruction of Troy, and in this case, Africa and the global experiences of Black people at Troy. I'm going to explain to you how. So, if you're thinking, and I'm not singling out men, just to be clear, I'm just explaining my point, that you cannot subjugate women in your own backyard and then complain of other ills like racism that befall you because of the color of your skin out there. It doesn't work like that. You have to step back and think about the relationship of the African or the Black people and the rest of the world. The relationship of Black people with the world has always been that of suffering. From as far back as the 1800s, when Mark Twain wrote his book, King Leopold's Soliloquy, and he was describing the horrors of the Congo, of fathers having to watch their children's hands being cut off because they were not meeting the rubber collection, just because a rich man wanted to get richer. And in recent times, there is the history of colonization and slavery. And then you also have to think about how Black people are killed every day without justification, and also that there's a whole system of mass incarceration of black people in for-profit prisons. Essentially, our interaction with the world has always been that of suffering. Back to the Trojan horse analogy. You cannot separate the global experience of black people from Africa's underdevelopment. Because when people say go back to Africa, they don't mean Africa in a good way. They mean a place of underdevelopment. They would say lack of civilization, and all these negative terms that come with it. But it's directly linked to the fact that the world sees Africa as underdeveloped. And when you look at the issue of underdevelopment in Africa, you cannot separate it from the fact that half of Africa's population is unable to go to their maximum potential because they are held back by cultural and structural issues that are held together because of patriarchy. And when I say half, I mean women. Now that we've talked about the dangers and threats of patriarchy, what can we do to end it? I have two suggestions. One, we must change how we think, and two, men must lead. When I talk about changing how we think, I mean in relation to how we think about power, because patriarchy is power. The funny thing about us as Africans or Kenyans is that we have a very, very strange relationship with power. We fear it, we revere it, but the worst thing of all, we never, ever question power. And that mentality, it's in our minds, it's in our homes, it's in our governance systems, and it is wreaking havoc. A friend of mine was expelled from school, in high school, because he dared to question a teacher. The issue wasn't even about what he questioned, the fact that the school refused to absolutely listen to what he had to say, because the bigger sin, other than the grievance, was that he had disobeyed his teacher, and therefore he had no place in that school. In our churches, we never question the man of God. I mean, how dare you question the anointed one? In politics, civilian protests, which are essentially a means of questioning government policies, are met with harsh and brutal crackdowns. Essentially, don't ask. And in our relationships, how dare you ask a man or question him? Because that's rude, and it often leads to domestic violence. What we have done is created a situation where asking any question is seen as a problem or something that needs to be dealt with the harshest punishment. And what we fail to realize is that asking questions, the question why, is leading to innovations beyond our wildest imagination out there in the world. Why can't a car drive itself? Why can't a desert become a bountiful harvest? Why can't a man be a boss at home, be a boss at work, wash dishes at home, take care of his children, and still be considered masculine? Why? When I was about 16, I was having a talk with my cousin about life. And she said something which I have always remembered to date. My cousin said, "Mwanamke ni kuvumilia," which essentially translates to be a woman is to persevere. And I remember back then thinking about it, and I'm like, why would any person with one chance in life decide to persevere rather than enjoy it to the fullest? I asked that question back then because I was innocent and naive, and I didn't understand how culture and tradition and the world works. But the older I've grown, the more I've realized that women persevere because they don't have a choice. Society does not give them a choice. Men don't give them a choice. Women are supposed to do one thing, and that's exactly what they're expected to do. However, we can question. There is nothing wrong with questioning. Questioning something does not mean you don't love it. We can be true to our culture, we can love it, we can question it, we can take what's good, we can discard what's bad. My other solution was that men must lead. And I say men must lead because I base it on the premise that I made at the beginning, that men hold the keys to the real power. Individually, men might not seem to recognize the privilege that they have, but as a group, men are privileged. And therefore, if we are to slay this demon that is patriarchy, men must lead. My father took the lead when he raised me to know that men and women contribute equally to family and society. My brother took the lead when he paid for my school fees when my parents were unable to pay for it. My husband took the lead when he had to stay behind with a 3-year-old daughter while I went off to pursue my higher education. And he continues to take the lead every day as we raise our children together as a unit, knowing that we are building something for the future, not that one person must do this and the other must do that. It's a together thing. I go back to the beginning when people ask me how I got to where I am. I am where I am today. I was able to build a company because I am an equal, and I always have been an equal. The men in my life created a world in which I could thrive, a world in which I could ask questions without fearing any consequence, a world in which I was not seen as a threat, and neither were they seen as weak because everybody played their part. A world in which I could ask why, which eventually led me to asking, why does a country like Kenya, with all her majestic reputation in running, never created a running shoe? If we want to change our narrative as individuals, as Kenyans, as Africans, as Black people or Africans, then we have to realize that we cannot do it with the status quo. We have to realize that to change, we must all work hand in hand, men and women, all of us at the table working together for the development of this continent. In short, we have to let women live free, and we have to let women go. Thank you.